Hello everyone, today we are here to ask and answer one simple question: is Uzoma Obilor natty or not? And no, we're not related, you're just racist. Not all mulattoes look alike. So Uzoma has been accused of being a fake natty by a lot of fitness YouTubers, most notably Philion, and that's somewhat understandable. He does have a very muscular physique that would be very difficult or perhaps even impossible for your average lifter to achieve, and along with that, he exhibits some other telltale signs of a fake natty. For one thing, his Instagram profile says natural bodybuilder. This is a very common thing for fake naturals to do. Simian Panda, for instance, claims he's a lifetime natural on his Instagram profile. People who are in fact on gear but want to convince you that they're natural tend to put way too much time and effort into convincing you that they're natural, and they'll claim they're natural every single chance they get. They'll claim they're natural on Instagram. They'll make YouTube videos about how they're natural, why they don't take steroids. They'll even take like steroid tests that are actually bogus, like Simian Panda did. So essentially what they're doing is they're overcompensating for when people accuse them of being on steroids, and if they were actually natural, they wouldn't go through all of this time and effort. So in this sense, at least, Uzoma does act suspicious on social media. But despite this, I don't think Uzoma has been fairly criticized, and people are just jumping to conclusions far too quickly. Just because Uzoma has an above-average physique and his behavior on social media is a bit questionable. So what I'm going to do is respond to Philion's video. So far, it's the most popular Uzoma Natty or Not video on YouTube. And I'm just going to, give my own opinions and provide some counter arguments. Now, I don't have a problem with Philion. I'm not doing this to hate on him or anything. It's just that this time I don't think Philion gave Uzoma fair criticism.
So after single-handedly taking down the Jersey Juice gang, I figured it was time to move on to some fresh, new fake nattiness. Uzoma Obilor looks like a cloud in the off-season, and then gets down to insane body fat percentages and holds on to all of his muscle.
Okay, so there's a few things here that are a bit inaccurate and misleading. For one thing, people who are on gear typically don't bulk up like Uzoma does in the off-season. They tend to stay fairly lean all year round, and that's for a few reasons. At least certain types of steroids can make it easier for you to stay lean all year round, and steroids make it easier to put on muscle, so these people can afford to stay in a caloric balance or in a caloric deficit for a much longer period of time, but still put on muscle. Naturals, on the other hand, well, we have a harder time putting on muscle, so typically for a natural, you do have to be in a caloric surplus. David Lade being a great example here. David Lade stays lean, extremely lean, all year round, yet he's still able to make some pretty damn good gains in strength progress, and it's likely because he's on gear. So when Philion mentions that Uzoma really bulks up in the off-season and then cuts down but only stays lean for a short period of time, that's evidence that he's natural, and I find this a little bit hypocritical of Philion. He actually used this argument against David Lade in his Natty or Not video, where he said David Lade is probably on gear because he stays lean but still makes amazing progress, whereas Uzoma doesn't stay lean. He really bulks up in the off-season, and then when he cuts down, he only stays lean for a short period of time.
However, this does not account for how shredded he is year-round. And he still makes strength progress. It's kind of, the two don't go hand in hand. So when you're bulking, you actually gain fat along with the muscle. But apparently, for Dave, bulking literally converts every single calorie into new muscle, and he just gets bigger and stronger. I don't know how he does this, but I think it's a little coincidental.
So again, I don't understand why Philion would use Uzoma's bulking and cutting cycles as evidence against him being natural, and on top of that, he claims that Uzoma holds onto all of his muscle even when he gets down to really low body fat percentages. And again, this is kind of a weird, misleading statement because Philion doesn't actually know Uzoma's body fat percentage when he gets this lean. Some people don't store as much subcutaneous fat, which is the fat underneath your skin. So that can make them appear much more leaner and shredded, but their body fat percentage is actually relatively high. So if you're one of these people who don't store as much subcutaneous fat, then it might be easier for you to look super lean and shredded while still holding on to a fair bit of muscle. Diet, training, and genetics also play a role here when you're dieting, and especially when you're trying to get super lean, your nitrogen needs increase dramatically, so you need to eat a lot more protein to hold on to muscle mass. And also doing high volume training will aid with the preservation of muscle mass. And if you take a look at Uzoma's channel, he does these two things. He does very high volume bodybuilding style training, and he also follows a high protein, low carb diet while he's dieting. And also, the low carb diet might be contributing to his really lean, shredded look. As most of you already know, low carb diets make you lose water retention. So that might be another factor here.
So pretty much what this diet entails is a high protein, high fats, and very low amount of carbs.
Of course, genetics play a role here. Some people are just better at gaining and maintaining muscle mass than other people, and I don't think anyone would question that Uzoma is genetically gifted. Even when he was much younger and he didn't really start weight training yet, he still looked like a really strong, muscular kid. And also, when you look at Uzoma when he's bulked up and when he's really lean and shredded, you do see that he does lose a lot of fullness. His muscles don't look as round and, he just doesn't look as big, which is indicative of a natural lifter. Naturals flatten out when they diet. Just because Uzoma does still look really good and round when he's dieted down, that doesn't mean he isn't flattening out like you'd expect a natural lifter.
He has some old posts with him and other fake natties like Simeon Panda. Right here he's with John Skywalker, who blatantly just says that he's on steroids.
I'm not sure what argument Philion was trying to make here. He was either claiming that because Uzoma associates with these, fake naturals or gear users, that means he's taking gear as well, and I don't think that's, fair to say. Or he's claiming that because he compares well in terms of size and overall physique compared to these, people who aren't natural, who are taking steroids, well, that means he's on steroids. Well, he doesn't compare to Simeon at all. Simeon's just way bigger, so I don't see how you can claim that there. And you would be able to argue that he does compare well to John Skywalker. He might even be a bit bigger, especially in the leg department, but again, that doesn't really say much. A lot of steroid users aren't huge guys. We all know how much gear Z's was taking, and he wasn't a big guy. He just wanted to look aesthetic like a model, and not everyone responds to these drugs in the same way. Cassidy Campbell from Train to Look Good Naked admitted to taking testosterone and Anavar, and he was really small. He looked like a total natural. So whether he compares well to these known steroid users doesn't really say much. Guys like John Skywalker clearly have different physique goals. I don't think John Skywalker trains the same way Uzoma does. And he also clearly doesn't take health and fitness as seriously as Uzoma because he's a smoker. And not everyone is going to be as genetically gifted as Uzoma. Some steroid users, no matter how much gear they take, they just won't be able to get as big as him because they're limited by their genetics.
So there's one video I'm going to look at in particular, and then maybe a few other videos, but this video really caught my attention. Is Uzoma Obilor really a natural bodybuilder? Why is it that the second most popular video on your channel is about you defending your natural status? Let me introduce you guys to the 3 golden rules of being a fake natty. Number 1. If you're making a living off of your physique, you're probably on steroids. If you have to tell everyone how natural you are, you're probably on steroids. And number 3, if you claim to work harder than everyone else, you don't, so you're probably on steroids.
So I already mentioned this. I do think Uzoma's behavior is suspicious, but this does have to be taken into context. Uzoma is a bit dramatic. He's a bit of a weird guy. I think he plays things up for the camera, maybe takes a few things a little too seriously, and he might just be a little socially awkward and doesn't know how to handle criticism. And I'm not saying that to criticize him or hate on him or anything. That's just the impression I've gotten from watching his channel. And so, yeah, it's kind of weird how he tries so hard to convince people he's natural, but in the context of how he normally behaves, I don't think it's so strange. And again, this isn't hard evidence. I don't think it's reasonable to say he's on gear just because he acts strange.
This shit is so dumb. You're an IFBB pro. You think that you can step on stage and compete against these guys without using gear. There's no such thing as natural bodybuilding.
So I do agree with Philion here to some extent. I would say that in almost every circumstance that if someone is an IFBB pro, there's almost a 100% chance they're on gear. However, in this particular circumstance, there are some interesting nuances. First of all, the photo Philion is showing here is from the show that Uzoma won his pro card, so he was only competing against other amateurs here. It wasn't a pro event. But he also failed to mention that he didn't come in first place. He only got second, and he only got second in his height and weight class, so there were quite a few other people on stage who were much bigger than him. And if you take a look at the official rules for classic physique and how the classes are divided by height and weight, it's arguably the easiest class in all of bodybuilding for a natural to compete in. Uzoma is 5'6" tall, which places him in the 168 centimeter class, and the maximum weight for the class is this equation. So the highest possible weight for this class is 160 pounds. Does 5'6" tall at 160 pounds sound unobtainable naturally? No, of course not, and that's why Uzoma looks his worst when he's competing in classic physique. He looks super flat and depleted, and he loses that bulky roundness he normally has, and it's because he's trying to fit within his weight limit. Philion completely ignored this fact, and he just jumped to the conclusion, oh, well, Uzoma has a pro card in the IFBB, so there's no way he can be natural. But he didn't look at the finer details. It's actually quite possible for a natural to compete in classic physique in the IFBB and do well because of their weird height and weight requirements. So it's definitely within the realm of possibility that Uzoma got his pro card while being a natty.
He goes from looking like he's gonna take my lunch money to stealing my girlfriend in a matter of weeks. You don't just become Optimus Prime in 12 weeks. I mean, Jesus Christ, he looks like the Terminator.
Well, 12 weeks is 3 months, and you can lose a lot of weight in 3 months. You also have to consider that Uzoma is pretty short. Like I mentioned before, he's 5'6" tall, so any weight he gains or loses will look like it's a lot more because he just has a smaller frame. So he might not have even had to lose that much weight in between these two photos. It might have only been around 20 pounds, and 20-pound weight loss in the space of 3 months is very doable. That's an average weight loss of around ½ a pound a week. And he does, in fact, lose size and fullness when he diets down, especially when you look at his classic physique competition photos.
So Uzoma is one of the select few that defies the laws of physiology. I mean, when he loses fat, he also gains muscle and just gets bigger. A lot of you guys may say, like, oh no, he's just cutting. No, he's literally getting bigger. His muscles grow in size when he's at a lower body weight.
And I just simply disagree here. I think Philion is just cherry-picking the most flattering and unflattering photos he can find. If you take a look at photos that are shot from comparable angles with comparable lighting, you can see that he does get smaller when he diets, and especially with his competition photos, you can see he definitely gets smaller. So given all of the available evidence, I'd have to say that Uzoma is natty. Of course, I could be wrong, and, you know, anyone can be on gear, but there's nothing that jumps out to me that screams Uzoma's on gear. Yeah, he does look really good, but, you know, he's also a pretty short guy, so when he grows, when he gains muscle, he's going to look a bit bigger and stockier than a normal person. He has good genetics. I think that's pretty obvious. He works hard, and, you know, when he does diet down, he does, you know, shrink a fair bit, especially when he's doing competitions, just like you'd expect of a natty. And he's also not particularly strong. Like, obviously he's a strong guy, but none of his lifts in the gym are just, like, outstanding. So, yeah, I'd have to say he's natty. And even if some of you disagree with me and you do think he's on gear, then I think you should at least consider some of the facts and arguments I presented here. I think Philion did make some pretty huge mistakes in his video, especially when it came to Uzoma's pro card. But tell me what you think in the comment section down below. Do you think Uzoma is natty or not? And if you like this video, maybe consider supporting me on my website. I have some funding perks you may find interesting. If you're looking for clothing, then check out the Vegan Gain store. And as always, keep making those vegan and natty gains.
What a relief. When will this poisonous product cease? This is another public service announcement. You can believe it or you can doubt it. Let us begin now with the cow. The way it gets to your plate and how.